So we are going to be doing our last of our series on habits, breaking bad habits, starting good ones. Some of you have told me these sermons have been very helpful. Others of you are probably ready for us to move on. That is okay. Not everything is equally helpful to every person, which is kind of one of the themes of the sermon this morning. One of the major things that I've tried to emphasize as we talk about habits is that this whole process of us being changed and becoming more like Jesus, this whole process of God transforming our character so that we are more filled with love and joy and peace and patience and kindness and goodness and faithfulness and self-control, this whole process is powered by grace. That God doesn't want us to be changed in order to love us. He loves us, and that drives him to help us to change, to be more of who we were always meant to be. So while grace drives it, the other thing that I've tried to emphasize is that he does call us to make an effort. That it's a struggle for us, but it's a struggle that we are supposed to be involved in. For instance, in Colossians, we read, "And when Christ, who is your life, is revealed to the whole world," in other words, when he returns, you will share in his glory. You also will be transformed and be given resurrected bodies. So put to death, he says, the sinful earthly things lurking within you. Have nothing to do with sexual immorality, impurity, lust, and evil desires. Don't be greedy, for a greedy person is an idolater, worshiping the things of this world. Because of these sins, the anger of God is coming. You used to do these things when your life was a part of this world, but now is the time to get rid of anger, rage, malicious behavior, slander, dirty language. Don't lie to each other, for you have stripped off your old sinful nature and all of its wicked deeds. Put on your new nature and be renewed as you learn to know your Creator and become like him. Man, that's a call to put in some effort, isn't it? Put off your old nature, who you used to be. Put on your new nature. Now you belong to God. Now you're forgiven. Now you are one of God's people. Put on your new nature and get rid of all of these things, greed and anger. And we say, yeah, I'd like to do that. Now tell me how, right? Because there's the call to effort there, but he doesn't really say how. So for the last few weeks, we have been talking about habits. And habits are those automatic behaviors that are so powerful. And if you have good habits, they pull you forward in this process of sanctification, this process of becoming more and more like Jesus. And if you have bad habits, they weigh you down, and it's like sailing against the wind or walking uphill. It's a struggle. And we've been talking about habits, and I have shown you this drawing more than once now, and you're probably thoroughly sick of it, but that is the anatomy of what a habit looks like. That there is a cue which cues you to do the automatic behavior. You're not thinking about it, you're just cued. And then the routine is the behavior of the habit. And then the reward is, the thing that you get for doing it. And then it's all powered by the craving for the reward. Now, one of the small groups met last Sunday after worship, and the small group leader came to me later and said, we had a question. The question came up, what's the difference between a cue and a craving? And I said, well, that's a really good question, and you need to know the answer. The cue is like the trigger, and the craving is like the bullet, right? You see you're walking through the office, and you see the vending machine, and that's the cue. Because then you're cued and you get the craving for the candy bar inside. And it's the craving that makes the habit so powerful. Trigger, bullet. I hope that helps. Somebody, like I said, y'all are probably thoroughly sick of seeing this drawing. This is the last time you will see it. But I know that it's been helpful to some of you because one of you, at least, came up to me and said, you know what, just seeing this helped me to understand how to deal with my anger. Paul tells us, get rid of your rage. Well, okay, Paul, how? Well, we've talked a couple of times about how your cues for becoming angry are the thing to notice. Because by the time you're yelling, right? So begin to understand your cues. And she said, well, I begun to think about my cues. And when it comes to my anger, I have a lot of cues, right? My kids not listening to me cues me. My driving in Houston traffic cues me. Not having my coffee before I drive in Houston traffic cues me. And I've talked about in the sermons about how when you begin to feel yourself being cued, that's the time to think about how do you replace the bad habit with the good habit. And she said, my problem is that the moment when I realize I'm cued, there's no time. I'm just cued, I'm triggered, damn, that's it. She said that she was yelling, she found herself yelling at some person, wonderful person, no doubt, in Houston traffic. And she, sometimes, hey, you're cued, you're in the habit, okay, maybe you should have caught it before, but, don't beat yourself up. You realize you're cued. She said, okay, I'm going to do something different. And so instead of yelling, she said, I just started counting. So I counted to 10, and you know what happened? Nothing. I was still mad, right? So I counted to 20. I was still mad. I counted to 50, and then I began to calm down, and I thought, that's it. She's got it. She's started to recognize her cues. She's starting to recognize her habits, and you know what? That's God's Holy Spirit helping her understand those things and beginning to give her the tools, but she still had to put in the effort. 10 didn't do it. 20 didn't do it. She counted, by golly, to 50. And that is the Holy Spirit using her efforts to begin to give her self-control over her anger. Get rid of your rage. By golly, good for her. A trick that I developed some time ago, because I get triggered by drivers too in Houston, probably everywhere, but I don't know what it is about Houston, but we tend to drive like maniacs. And, when somebody does something incredibly dangerous right in front of me, especially when they've endangered me, what I've started doing is I pray for that person. Now, it's not always a very spiritual prayer, okay? Sometimes it's, God, please protect that idiot and keep him from killing me. But you know what? When you're praying for somebody, even if it's not a very spiritual prayer, you're still praying for them, and it's hard to stay enraged at somebody you're praying for. Maybe that's a good thing if somebody in your life particularly enrages you, step up your prayer game for that person. So habit loops are a lot of fun. And here's the thing, as we talked about it, there are certain things that we human beings all have in common. Habits look like that habit loop. The anatomy is the same. It's hard to start new good habits. They tend to be fragile. It's hard to stop entrenched bad habits. They tend to be powerful. But we're all different too. And we can't approach every habit the way every other person approaches every habit. And one of the most beloved Psalms in the Bible is Psalm 139. And let me just read it to you. Again, this is God saying something about who he is and about something about who we are. And he does it through David. And when David says you, he's talking to God here. And I used to have the bookmark in place. There's Psalm 139. And I'm just going to start in verse 13 and just read a couple of verses. You, God, made all the delicate inner parts of my body and knit me together in my mother's womb. Thank you for making me so wonderfully complex. Your workmanship, think about it, he's talking about himself. Your workmanship is marvelous, how well I know it. You watched me as I was being formed in utter seclusion. In other words, nobody else could see me in my mother's womb, but I was woven together in the dark of the womb. You saw me before I was born. Every day of my life was recorded in your book. Every moment was laid out before a single day passed. So you get this idea that God knows you better than you know yourself. And one of the ways to worship God is to learn to know yourself. I think that's a really interesting idea. That when you're learning to understand yourself, that's not a selfish thing. You're actually can be a form of worship. And when it comes to habits, knowing yourself is important because in some ways, like I said a minute ago, we're like everybody else. But have you ever been trying to change a habit? Have you ever been trying to start a habit, a good habit? Have you ever been trying to stop a bad habit? And you're talking with somebody and they say, well, here's what I do. And sometimes, what they do is like really helpful. And you're like, well, you know what? I'm going to try that. That seems like it might really work. And other times, the suggestion that they make, you just know it's just not going to work for you, right? You ever had that experience? Somebody tells you how they do something, and you're like, yeah, I don't think that'd work for me. And sometimes they get this real judgy look on their face, like, well, if you just do it my way, right? And then sometimes we do that with our kids too. If you just do it my way. But you know what? Here's the thing. God knit us together in our mother's wombs, and we're not all the same. And learning how God made you can help you in trying to figure out, how do I start a good habit? How do I stop a bad habit? One of the books that I read talked about this. I want to give her credit. Her name's Gretchen Rubin. She wrote a book called Better Than Before. It's not written from a spiritual or a Christian point of view. It's a secular book. But I found it helpful because she talked about the differences that people have and how it affects our habits. For instance, one difference is some people are early birds and some people are night owls. Okay, I like to get up early. I like to be at the church before 7 a.m. pretty much every day. You do know I come here more than once a week, right? I'm here like 5-6 days a week. I'm here, right? Before 7. And I get here and I do my praying, and then, probably the most important thing that I do arguably the most important thing that I do during the week is I work on the sermon. And so I give that the morning because that's when I have energy, because I'm an early bird. And I arrange my habits around the morning because that's when not everybody's an early bird. For instance, Pastor Rich. Are you an early bird? Pastor Rich is a night owl. It's too early. I'm waking him up. I asked him earlier this week if I could use him as an example, and he did say yes. And I said, Rich, are you a night owl because you're a youth pastor and you want to relate to the kids and teenagers tend to be night owls, right? Little kids tend to be early birds, and then they become night owls, and then sometimes they go back. I said, are you a night owl because you work with the kids? And he says, no, I'm a night owl because I'm a night owl, all right? He says, the reason why God created sunsets is because some of us will never see the sun rise, okay? Which I thought was really funny. And so if a night owl comes to me and they're like, well, tell me how you pray and what do you do? And if I say, well, what you really need to do is set your alarm clock half an hour earlier, set your alarm clock an hour earlier and get up to pray. I pretty much set the night owl up to fail, haven't I? Because the night owl's already getting up as early as they possibly can because the world basically is structured around the early birds. So what the night owl has to do is they have to build their habits around later in the day when they have the energy. And you know what? That's fine. There's no right or wrong here. God wove us together in our mother's wombs a little differently. You need to pray in the evening or the afternoon or whenever you have the energy. All right, difference number 2. What's different? Big leaps versus small steps. Okay, Paul told us that God is doing a wholesale renovation, right? Put off your old self, put on your new self, all these changes God wants to make. And sometimes when people they decide, you know what, I need to make some changes. Some people are big leapers. They're like, I'm just going to start everything at once. I'm going to start a new bedtime routine so I get up at a certain time, and then I'm going to change my diet, and I'm going to start praying, and I'm going to start doing exercise, and I'm going to keep a log of how many times it tells me to get rid of malicious talk. So I'm going to record every time that I say something negative. Hey, you can't change what you don't monitor, so don't knock writing little things down for yourself in a little log of some kind. That's a good thing to do. It's a good habit. But some people are like, I'm going to do it all at once. They're the big leapers. But other people are the small steppers. They're like, you know what? Let me focus on this habit. And let me start off small, and I'll work on this habit. And when I feel like I've got that habit down, I'll work on the next habit, and then the next habit, and then the next habit. Small steppers. Well, which way's right? Well, it depends on you, right? The big leapers are people that are like, you know what? I'm going to try to change everything, and all of it might not work, but some of it will. And I'll make some progress. Their motto is, aim for the moon, and at least if you don't make it, you'll land among the stars, right? You'll make some change. Small steppers are people that are like, look, if I try this and I fail, I'm going to get discouraged and I'm going to quit and I'm not going to make any progress at all. So instead of walking 4 times around the block and not making it and getting discouraged, I'm just going to walk 1 time around the block today. And as soon as I get that down, maybe next week I'll walk 2 times around the block. I'm not going to try to pray for an hour each day. I'm going to sit down, I'm going to pray for 5 minutes. And when that's comfortable and I've got that down, I'll pray for 10 minutes. Small steps. Their motto is, how do you eat an elephant? 1 bite at a time. That's right. That's right. And there's no right or wrong there, and you may be somewhere in the middle. Right? Some people are big leapers, some people are small steppers. All right, so what's the next one? Familiarity versus novelty. Some people, when it comes to habits, it's better if they stick to the same routine and do things the same way. Some people, it's better if they spice things up, give some variety, try new things. Personally, I'm more of a familiarity person. When I come to the office, I have the same routine. I pray. When I pray the same pattern. I never use a devotional. I just read the Bible. I read 1 chapter. I think about it. I read it really slowly. I pray as I'm reading. I pray over what I'm reading. And then I get to the end, and then I pray for other people, and then I pray for the things that I need, and then I sit in silence for as long as I can, just sitting and listening to God. And that's my routine, and I don't ever change it. Every now and then I'll pick a different translation of the Bible. That's about the most novelty that I need. Exercise, same way. On Mondays and I swim. On Tuesdays I lift weights, and I know each day of the week which one I'm going to do. And when I lift weights, I always lift in the same routine. And you know what? There's probably better ways to do it. But if I change it up, then I have to think too much, and then I'm just not going to do it at all. So I have to keep the same routine because that gives me the structure to do the good habits. But for other people, man, that would drive them crazy, doing the same thing in the same way, and they need to mix it up. And instead of praying the same way, one day they need to pray using a devotional. The next day they pray just using the Bible. They switch up which devotional they use. Some days they don't sit down and pray at all. They walk around the block and get outside and get out in God's creation and pray over their neighborhood. They might sing their prayers one day. They need the novelty. Pray with people one day. Pray alone the next. For some people, my wife, when it comes to exercise, I never know what she's going to do. It's like, well, what are you doing today? And she's like, I don't know. I'm going to do whatever I feel like doing. Right? But that works for her. One day she runs outside. The next day she goes to the gym and does a class. One day she goes with Crazy Molly and runs the stairs at the Berry Center. And the variety, the novelty keeps it fresh for her. And that reinforces the habit. Are you trying to say you don't do that? Because I see you shaking, and you know you do that. She needs novelty. I need more familiarity. And, everybody's different. Find what works for you. Another difference, moderation versus abstaining. This one's important when you're trying to cut down on a bad habit. You want to eat less ice cream, or you want to play video games less than you do now. You want to get on social media less than you do now. Or do you need to moderate, cut it down to just a little bit, or do you need to abstain altogether? Well, that just kind of depends, right? Sometimes people will tell you, well, here's what you should do. Just have 1 spoonful of ice cream. Well, that works for some people because they get a taste and the craving goes away. But what happens to other people? You get a taste and what happens? The craving actually gets stronger. You eat the whole pint, the whole gallon, whatever. Yeah, y'all just need to abstain on that stuff, right? And you have to figure out, you have to listen to yourself. As you listen to yourself, you're listening to the way that God made you, right? Is the craving getting stronger or is the craving getting weaker? Some people can say, yeah, I'm going to play a video game for half an hour and then I'm going to put it down. And some people are like, if I play a half an hour, it's going to be 4 hours, and then my wife's going to be yelling at me because she wants me to help clean the kitchen or whatever, and I'm like, I can't because I'm playing a video game. Right? So you have to figure out what works for you so that you get, I know some of the moms are looking at their sons there right now. I don't know why it's the sons that have the problem with that. Daughters, it's the social media. Am I right? All right, we're moving on now. All right, abstain. And you know what? Here's the other thing. It might depend on which habit it is. You might need to abstain from some things, but be able to do moderation in other things. And you just kind of have to know you. Anyway. All right, so when it comes to habits, the final God-given difference, which this is again from Gretchen Rubin, she calls them the 4 tendencies. And I found this to be really kind of insightful. Because when it comes to habits, and you're trying to start a good one, or you've got expectations. And the expectations are either within you or other people have the expectations. And people kind of fall into 4 groups. Upholders are people that they basically wake up in the morning and say, what's on my to-do list? What's on my schedule? And they are good at meeting those inner expectations. Like if they decided they were going to jog in the morning, by golly, they get up and they jog. If somebody else has an expectation of them, I need you to be here for this, then they show up and they're probably early and prepared for whatever it is. Because expectation, Judith, I don't mean to call you out, where are you? But I think you're an upholder. Because you basically, if somebody has an expectation of you, you bothers you if you don't meet it. And you also are really good at your own expectations. And she has a GPA of like 97 because, like everything's, that's the expectation. And she's just good at it. Not everybody is an upholder, but upholders tend to be pretty amazing people. And you probably loved this sermon series on habits because it's given you some more tools to how to meet all those expectations. Now, that's a very small percentage of the population. Far more of us are questioners. We meet our inner expectations, but we resist outer expectations. What does that mean? Well, that means just because other people think we should do something doesn't mean that we think that we should do something, right? But if the person will give us reasons why, and we accept those reasons why, it goes from being an outer expectation to being an inner expectation. And then we meet that. For instance, you might be like, well, why should I exercise? Or why should I pray every day? But then if you accept the reasoning for why, you go, well, of course I'm going to do those things because they just make sense. I think Jake, where are you, Jake? Back here? He's in the middle? Oh, there he is. Usually you're over there or over there. Okay, there you are. I think Jake is a questioner. Like, just because people expect him to do something, it doesn't make any sense. I'm like, why would I do that? It seems stupid, right? But if he's like, okay, I understand it, then I'll do it. Guess which category I fall into? I am a questioner. Yeah, I'm not going to do it just because everybody expects it, because maybe it's stupid, right? But if I have the reasons. And so if you're a questioner, what you need in order for you to buy into a habit is you need answers. All right? Obligers are the opposite of the questioners. Obligers can have all the reasons why and still not do it, because they can't meet their own expectations. I know I should exercise. I know I should eat right. I know I should pray. What they need are external expectations, outer expectations. They need it because what they need is accountability. And if they have accountability, they'll do it because they'll meet them. In other words, if they have an exercise buddy who's waiting for them at the gym, by golly, they'll show up because they don't want to disappoint that other person. They have a prayer partner, they'll pray because they don't want to disappoint that other person. Weight Watchers was created by obligers for obligers, right? I mean, you can have all about, why you should eat this and why you shouldn't eat that, and you should, and you're fully bought in. But if it's just you and your own inner expectations to be like, I'll start tomorrow, right? But if you know that you're going to have to go to a meeting once a week and get on a scale in front of a bunch of other people, that external accountability will work for you and you'll keep the habit. So if you're an obliger, reasons aren't going to do it for you. You need that external accountability. And then finally, we get to our rebels. Rebels hate and resist expectations of all kinds. Whether they're other people's expectations or even their own expectations. And you rebels, you have probably hated every moment of this sermon series on habits. Why should I conform? I need my freedom. A rebel can be given all of the answers by the questioner saying, well, you need to do this and you need to do this and here's why you need to do it. It makes perfect sense to do it. And they're like, I don't care. I need freedom. Told by a group of obligers that they will be held accountable. You need to do this, and you need to do it this way. The rebel will find some way to rebel, even if it's in a small way that nobody notices, just to assert their autonomy, right? I'm going to be 5 minutes late, just to make my point, right? When it comes to habits, if you're a rebel, you just need to decide each day, hey, this is my fresh choice to do this, because that's all that's going to work for you. Approach each choice as a freedom. So I'm curious, God made you, and he made us all different. Do you find yourself fitting into a category? How many of you think that you might be an upholder? It's not a big group, right? There's a few of you. Judith, you're not raising your hand. All right, maybe she's a rebel. Okay. All right. So God bless you. You don't need any more advice from me. You upholders are going to do it. How many of you think you might be a questioner? Yeah, that tends to be a bigger group. You guys need answers. Get your answers. Why does this sort of make sense to you? Then you'll do it. How many of you are obligers? Yeah, obligers tend to be the one category that doesn't really like themselves. Like, why can I meet other people's expectations, but I can't meet my own? But just know that, God wired you to be connected to other people. God wired you for community. That's not a bad thing. How many of you are rebels? All right, a few of you are rebelling against holding up your own hand, right? You rebels, you get out there and show them, rebel against society. Nobody thinks that you can quit that bad habit. Nobody thinks you can start that good habit. You show them. And the rebel's thinking, that sounds like a clever trick to get me to conform. He's telling me to rebel against my own rebellion, so maybe I should rebel against that, right? But that would mean I'm rebelling against rebellion against rebellion. Hey, God knit you together in your mother's womb. You are wonderfully made. We're all a little different. What works for some people is not going to work for others when it comes to habits. So know yourself. Because knowing yourself can actually be a part of your worship of the God who made you. So ask God for help to understand yourself and ask God to help you as he transforms you into a new creation. Amen.